Let's rewind like a VHS. Turn back the time, feel the beat of our chest. Make sure that we never forget. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. Let's concede that we wanna believe that the past was only a dream, just a place that we never could leave. Follow what's on the way to retrieve. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. Like a VHS, turn back the time, feel the beat in our chest. Make sure that we never forget. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. Let's concede that we wanna believe that the past was only a dream, just a place that we never could leave. Follow what's on the way to retrieve. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS.
What's up, everyone? DJ Anubis here with you on the Meltdown Radio podcast with my good friend and co-host Kevin Lambert from the Entertainment Headquarters, and we are here with the Cinematic Synergy doing his choice this time, 1997's Dante's Peak. Sir, thank you for joining me. Glad to have you here as always.
Thank you for having me. You know I love doing this with you, and as always, it's a pleasure to be a part of the Metal Tavern Radio.
Yeah, this is one of the earliest shows that I had, and you were there from the start, so it's kind of fun that we're still doing it after all this time now, even though your channel's taken off and you've got a lot of different programs on your channel as well. So yeah, it's great.
I never forget where I come from, put it that way. And at the end of the day, my channel, you see, it's taken off. It's okay. It's, you know, I'm not.
It's
hitting,
great. It's not okay. It's great.
I'm not like hitting.
Stuff.
Well, thank you, but it's not like I'm hitting 1 million views. You know, I'm not The Rock.
Not yet, anyway.
No, but
so what? You know, I know that you a while back you did a top 10 disaster films. I can't remember if this made your list or not, but what made you select this for this episode?
Trying to think if it did make me top 10. The reason I selected this is because I haven't seen this for a long time, and it was always one of those films that I remember, like back in the 1990s, there was always that dueling like kind of films, so especially with disasters. So obviously we had this one, which is Dante's Peak, and next to it, either come around the same time, a month or two after or before, it was Volcano. And
Said it
then
was, I think this came out 3 weeks before Volcano did. Like they said that in the trivia that it was a race to get this out because they were working on Volcano too. So, which is funny because he said that this one actually ended up having more success than Volcano.
yes, and you can tell, like, and I'll explain why, like,
Mhm.
in a bit. But you also had Armageddon in
Deep
Deep
Impact.
Impact.
Yeah.
So for me, this is how I look at it, and this is what so Volcano was the bigger studio movie,
Yeah.
got the biggest hype, got the most attention, flopped. This one didn't flop, but it did okay. This was the lesser of the two bigger studio movies, was a better success. Armageddon, of course, as I know, did much better than
Dante's Peak, yeah. Even though Dante's Peak had, or not Dante's Peak, but Deep Impact had like a really good cast too, which is unfortunate.
yeah. But the thing is, for me, when I look at Armageddon, it's a big budget popcorn movie where they were capturing the summer vibe. It was it had all the things to make a great movie, but the one thing I found with Deep Impact, it had the heart.
Yes.
There was
Yeah,
something
it took
about
Deep Impact was a little more serious than Armageddon. Armageddon had that comedy thrown in there.
We had this conversation last night when we did the creature feature, where you absolutely love Lake Placid. I absolutely love Lake Placid. I absolutely do. I admire the comedy, but then Crawl, that were also reviewed, had like that more, natural disaster feel. It was more serious, and because it was probably the newer of the others, I just really gelled with it. And the fact is, I got to see that in theaters.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think it had a bigger impact on this. When it
Sure.
came to Armageddon in Deep Impact, it was sort of reverse. I actually got to see Armageddon in theaters. And as much as I thought, like yourself, when it came to Lake Placid, I thought it was a great movie. And then it was a few months later, I got to see Deep Impact, and even though I never got to see that in the theaters, that had a bigger impact on me, literally, because I love the emotional stories. It was more of a character-driven story, where Deep Impact was there for the thrills and the humor and all of that, and that's what appealed to us, and that's why I chose also Dante's Peak.
Right.
With Dante's Peak, Volcano, for me, it was the fact that it was made by, I'm not saying a bigger studio, but it just felt like a bigger tentpole movie, like they plucked it in a big spot, expecting it to be just a huge success. Where Dante's Peak, like, wasn't given the attention as much
Yeah, I
as
remember that. I remember
Volcano.
all the commercials and the trailers for Volcano. They were really pushing that film.
Yeah.
But
Where
this
Dante's
one,
Peak,
yeah,
didn't get the same attention, but for me, it was a better film.
yeah.
And that's why I chose it.
So Dante's Peak, as I said, is a 1997 American disaster film directed by Roger Donaldson and stars Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton as our main protagonists. And basically, it starts out, and I've talked to you about this before with this particular scene in the early part of the film. Brosnan is like a geologist who at the time is working with a coworker who I think is also either his girlfriend or wife. They never really say it's his wife, so I think it's just like a girlfriend. But they're dealing with a volcano that erupts, and I think it's in the Philippines or something. But they're there a little bit too long, so like the lava bombs are starting to fly around them and a lot of ash and stuff. And that's the thing about the chaos with volcanoes, is that even we see it even in this film with Dante's Peak, where it makes it hard to see because the ash is flying around you. But early part of the film, he goes to get Marianne, who's his partner, and they're driving away trying to get out. And, they're also kind of like, there's like this excitement because they're witnessing something that they've been studying. And so it's like a kind of like a tale for them to tell if they get out of it alive. Like at that moment, they're not really thinking about the chance of death, even though they know it could be real. So obviously, as they're driving away, one of these lava bombs crashes through the part of the truck where she's at. And I hate watching that scene like so much. Like it's so painful. Because Brosnan has to turn over and look at her, and she's like basically going through the death twitch, and because it's crashed through to her head because it just melts right through. It's like you can't do anything about it, and she dies in his arms. And so I'll get to some other things about the acting later, but the scene itself is still set up very nicely, and it sets the tone for how Brosnan's character has kind of dealt with stuff going on, which we see how the reaction from his boss early on in the film plays a factor in that, because he's kind of like not taking him that serious when he's concerned about Dante's Peak and what could happen. But tell me how you felt, because I do want to talk about that scene, that opening scene. How did you feel when you first saw that?
Oh, absolutely heartbreaking. It's like you described it your way. My way is he was where he was very naive in a way. When he gets to Dante's Peak and he immediately calls a town meeting.
Yeah.
Skipping ahead just a little bit, just to explain it a bit. So it gets to the point where he examines the water. He straight away calls a town meeting and he's like, we need to evacuate. And, then his boss comes in and he's like, you're calling this a bit too soon. We don't actually know if the volcano's actually at the peak where it is going to erupt. So he does that, but then we'll go back to that scene where I feel like, in my mind, he was in a place where he didn't think it was at that peak, and they hesitated, and they decided to have just a bit of fun, just relax a bit and don't take it as serious. And then when it all hit, they were too late to get out, and because it was too late to get out, tragedy struck. And because it struck, unfortunately, the woman that he was dating was, killed during that incident. And I think immediately your heart breaks for him because it's somebody he traumatically loves. And then now he's straight away, when he's at Dante's Peak, he's like, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I'm going to react straight away and go, right, we need to evacuate. We need to do this. We need to do that. And I think it's all due to the fact that this first incident that happened, that was not my, by the way, that was not my microphone. Customer guys. Because tragedy had unfortunately struck, he's now not taking any risks.
Yeah. So that after that incident, we find him where he gets a call from the boss, played by Charles Hallahan, who I've seen him in other films like I think it was Negotiator and stuff like that. But anyway, he
was he not in Basic Instinct as well? Or was that somebody else?
I'm gonna look real quick because I want to say he was in a thing, but I don't know. I have to double check.
He was in the thing.
Let's see. Yes, he was Dr. Vance Norris. So he's the guy that actually ends up having the heart attack in that film. So
and his chest burst open.
Yeah. So that's where people would recognize him. So he's the boss, and so he calls Harry Dalton, who's played by Brosnan, who is he says, I need you to check out some stuff over at Dante's Peak. Maybe nothing, but just go take a look. And that's when it says what you were talking about, where he's testing waters, and he's got to meet the mayor, played by Hamilton, named Rachel Wando. And so she also runs like a little shop out there in the mountains. Like it's a nice little village town out in the mountains here by the peak. And so she's both mayor and also running this nice little shop. So, it's a nice little tight knit community. They're all friendly. They all like each other. They got some hot springs out there, which comes into play early in the film because a couple that might be tourists coming through decides to skinny dip in it. And then they aren't able to get out of it fast enough before the heat from the mountain, like, raises so hot that they just can't escape and they end up scalding them to death.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Dalton, he's being shown around by Wando to go do the test. It was something they set up to do. He says, the water seems a little off, but nothing too concerning right now. But then because she has 2 kids and her mother-in-law, because she's separated from her husband, so she's taking care of the kids, but the mother-in-law still lives up high in the mountains. So anyway, they decide to go to the hot springs, and the boy gets ready to jump in until Dalton stops him, and then they see the 2 bodies of the tourists in the water. So clearly the water is unsafe. And so that's when he goes to call the meeting and says, look, I highly recommend that we start preparing, at least have people prepared to go, as fast as possible when they need to. But when, of course, Paul Dreyfus, the boss, comes in, he's concerned that Dalton is jumping the gun. And because of his past trauma, thinks that's what's leading to him being overreacting. So he's like, we can't go upon opinions. We have to go upon scientific evidence. Mm-hmm. But it's mainly politics. It's because this town relies on people to be there. They don't want to leave. Yeah. It's like the whole Amity Jaws thing. We just can't have it. Just pick up and leave.
The one thing I find funny about this is that you've got Linda Hamilton playing the Mia, but she's kind of like, she's not really a hands-on Mia. She's like,
yeah.
It makes me wonder why she was made Mia, because obviously the first scene you see, she's over. Obviously, she slept in. So she's not really taking her responsibilities serious, like Pioneer Day in the town, and like she slept in. Her daughter's helping her get ready, and then obviously all that shit happens, and then that particular scene when they find the scalded people in the pool, and then she's trying to explain to them, guess what? He's trying to say, guess what? This is looking bad. It's looking serious. What ends up happening is he immediately calls this meeting, and there's one other particular person who's like, are you sure? Are you sure this is happening? Because we're on the cusp of, getting an 80 million deal to bring jobs to the valley, to Dante's Peak, the village. And now if you call this, it's going to be called off. So he's like that. And then, he's being very adamant that this thing's going to happen. Linda Hamilton's like, she's like agreeing with him. She's like, let's just see go with what he's saying. And then when his boss turns up, it's like, well, you haven't followed the protocol. We don't have any, apart from them people in the hot springs that's been scalded. Was it really, ash or volcano eruptions or whatever that's done this? Until we fully understand the geomatic, area and what's going on, you're calling it too soon. And so it creates kind of a tension between him and the townspeople, or the townspeople and Linda Hamilton, who is the mayor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really weird because even with Dalton and Dreyfus, his boss, like, there's a friendship there, but it's really it's well played because it shows that Dreyfus still has his boss duties.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'm like early on when he's first telling Dalton that, we can't do this. And the council people are like, well, maybe we shouldn't have had this meeting this soon. This is like overreaching. Like they're starting to push against Dalton now because of what the boss said. And then I'm like, if I'm Dalton, I'm like, dude, I'm just going to pack up and leave. That's what I'd be doing. Like, you handle this. This would be your bitch. Like, if you fuck up, it's on you, which
Mhm.
we'll get to later. But he just ends up going to like a local bar somewhere, and that's where the boss shows up. And then you kind of see that they do have a good relationship as friends. It's just that,
I love the dynamic between them because it's
yeah,
not
the
like
Dreyfus is just trying to be
Mhm.
politically correct and make sure he doesn't get in trouble. And then, but Dalton is trying to be worrisome because he doesn't want to happen what happened with him and his
Yeah.
fiancee. So it's like,
Yeah. The one thing I do love about the relationship and these two particular characters is that, as we know, with majority of disaster movies or any type of film like this, it's you always stereotypically have the person who's the hero character who goes to a boss, and the boss is always a dick. They're
yeah,
always an asshole. They're like always pushing against them, and there's always this love-hate relationship, and then disaster strikes. That's what I loved about their relationship, is that his boss is not any of that. He's just following protocol, and he's not being negative. He's not being nasty. He's not like calling them names. He's quite a nice guy deep down.
yeah,
And that's for me stands out for this film. And at the end of the day, what happens to the boss later on, it's very sympathetic.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yep.
normally, like if something happens later on to a character like that who's pushing against the hero of the film or the lead of the film, you couldn't give a shit. You're glad that they died, or you're like they got the comeuppance. But with this particular character, you don't have that.
Yeah, he immediately, once shit starts hitting the fan, he's like telling Dalton, like, you were right, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually, he tells, like, there's a group of other ones that work with them all, some other characters. And he's like, I need you guys to leave. I'm going to stay behind, because he wants to make sure Dalton gets out of there. But the rest of them, they're all a team. So they're like, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay here and help. And so that does lead to a tragedy, unfortunately. But just to get kind of back to the story. So once the boss puts everyone's mind at ease and say, you know what, we don't have any scientific evidence. We're going to hang around for a week, see what happens. But the volcano stays pretty dormant until Dalton ends up looking at some water that they drink out of that's very muddy and dirty, and so it's like sulfur dioxide, so it's very toxic. That's the evidence he has that he
But
shows to.
there's a lead up to that though, because Linda Hamilton, she's not had Nuki for quite some time. Her character,
Yeah.
her husband I can't remember. Did he die or did he leave? I'm not quite. I can't.
I think he left because the mother-in-law towards the end, she's like, she was always kind of bitter and kind of blaming Hamilton's character for her son taking off and leaving the kids. But I think at that moment she acknowledged that it wasn't her fault. She was trying to put what's her name, Rachel's mind at ease, because she was in her final moments. I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but that's sort of what leads to that reconciliation between both of them towards the end.
So, like I say, her character, obviously she's a single mother. She had the two kids. She's the mayor of Dante's Peak. She has like a tumultuous relationship with her mother-in-law. And our mother-in-law is very, very stubborn. She's stuck in her ways, all this stuff. But then obviously her and Dalton have like a connection, an attractiveness. They kind of fall for each other. And I think he's attracted to her as well because it's his first potentially, liaison or relationship with a woman outside the woman.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think they said it was 4 years after or something. So yeah.
And so they get to this moment where something's about to happen, and then he goes out. She's like, "Can I get a glass of water?" And so she goes. They get a glass of water, and when she turns on the tap, it's all sulfurated. It's all like.
So that's his evidence to Paul. He's like, this is happening. So that at that moment, Paul's like, okay, yeah, we got to take this serious now. And it isn't too long before they get some tremors and the earthquakes, stuff like that that's happening where it's shaking up the town. And unfortunately, the town, like they're in the middle of a meeting because they are trying to warn them now that you got to get the hell out of Dodge. And somebody like, can we leave now? And Rachel's like, yeah, man, go, whenever you want. But they'd hardly even get out of that meeting before it starts collapsing around them. The town just starts having issues.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like during the meeting. It's during the meeting where, and him who's trying to broker the business deal to bring the business into the city. He's like, it's over the top. It's not necessary. This is not really. And then you've got the townspeople who are scared in the meeting, and the next thing you know, you hear the seats start shaking. There's like an earthquake that begins to happen. Parts of the town hall start to shake, and there's bits that fall off a little. And then next thing you know, boom, mass panic sets in. They all start trying to leave the town hall, I'm assuming. And you see the top of Dante's Peak explode.
Yep.
And obviously everyone's in a mass panic. There's people running over each other. There's people being crushed. There's cars crashing into things. The road's starting to like pull up and like, disjointed and starts to flare up. So basically it becomes like a war zone. People are trying to get out safely, but then there's, like you say, there's the mass panic.
Yeah, so everything starts to go to shit basically. Dalton and Rachel first, because they were there at the meeting, had to leave the kids behind at the house. But the kids are so worried about grandma that they somehow find mommy's car keys and take the truck, even though they're very young. But you guys suspend belief a little bit.
This is the unbelievability in the fucking story, because you've got this little kid who
it would have been okay had the boy been a little bit older and maybe had his permit. Like that would sell more for me with this than, like a 10 or 11-year-old taking the truck and driving. It's not like he doesn't know what to do, but it's like, it's not really that believable.
But like, we'll pull back a little bit So the grandkids, the grandkids of the grandmother, their dad's not there. There's only the grandmother who has like a battle with Linda Hamilton's character. And like, the grandmother's very stubborn. She's stuck in her ways, but the one thing you can absolutely tell is she's absolutely in love with her grandkids.
Yep.
They have such a strong bond. And obviously when all this chaos, happens, the first thing the kids are like, we need to go save grandma. Which apart from the unbelievability bit of like this little kid being able to pick up the car keys and drive a car, and the fact is he's not that big and he's driving the car, and his sister's right next to him, you would think it would be more believable, and they could have made a bit of a comedy element in this where he's driving the car and she's down the below kicking the pads in the car. But they didn't do that. They tried to make it like, oh, this is what's happening, you need to believe it. And it was like, that was a bit crazy. But the heartbreaking part about this is I believe in the relation with the grandkids and the grandmother. So obviously later on what happens in the story was quite heartbreaking. But I understand the urge of, if you've got in a bond with your grandparents, you want to try and protect them and save them and be there for them. So I understood.
Yeah, I'm sure people also probably like, because, obviously Rachel tries to call the mother-in-law to see, hey, you got to come down because this volcano is going to have, this is before it even goes exploding. And she's like, you got to leave. But grandmother's like, no, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home, yada, yada, yada. So she has to try to explain to the kids, like, look, grandma's a big girl. She's making her own choice. So, that's just, but the kids, they don't want to do that. They don't want to listen. They want to get grandma because they care about grandma. So people might say, well, Rachel's being uncaring, but that's not really it. It's just that the grandmother really is an adult. Like, you can't force people to leave. I mean, even though you might want to, if that's a choice they make, then you kind of have to just let them respect that. But back to them driving up there through the ash, no less. Like, you can't even see shit. Like, that's even the other part of it that's crazy. But
there's another unbelievable moment that does not make sense to me. There's the sense where, when they leave the town hall and fucking chaos happens and everyone's trying to get away. There's that scene with Dalton, and he's in the car and he decides to drive across the road into the river, and he's trying to drive and to get up to the ramp to get to the other way. In the water's flooding the engine, but the engine's still going and the wheels are spinning, and he's like, "Oh, we'll be okay. And the next thing you know, other cars do the exact same thing. They dive into the river at the track. Then the car comes along and it hits the side of his car because he's now stuck in this ditch in the water. But because the other car hits him, he gets away and he zooms off. And it's like, that wouldn't happen, because I'm assuming if a car, I don't drive, but I'm assuming if a mass amount of water flooded the engine, the car wouldn't function.
Yeah. So, two things. One, his truck is designed for off-roading, for that kind of stuff. He can technically get through deep water. The only issue is the amount of water that we saw. So let's say the water comes up to about where the headlights are. Well, he could technically still be fine, but we see it to where it actually covers the entire hood. At that point, you're correct. There's no way that it's going to stop the water from flooding that engine and shorten that truck out. So that's not true. Like, that's a ridiculous notion. That would have never happened. But
it's the fact as well, though, the cars that entered the water that went in to follow what he was doing, and then were just kind of floating down the river at the water. They were cars that were not built for that. They were regular cars.
No, and I think the idea there is that they were trying to show people who were panicking. They're like, "Oh, look what this guy's doing. He's because it's all traffic. Everyone's trying to get out." So they're like, it's like everyone trying to run over each other to get hell out of town. So they see him crossing the river and they think, "Oh, I can do that," but they're in regular cars. So the minute they hit the water, they're flooded and then they're floating down the river. So they can't do it because his truck is actually specifically designed for off-roading. That's the whole point of it. But yeah, it was a little bit far-fetched with him getting the entire truck covered in water and he could still sit there and drive. It's like, no.
Yeah, like I say, like, that's what I found hilarious, is when he hit the water and you had the regular cars hit. One, the unbelievability of what he was trying to do. And then I agree, like, the panic set in and the drivers got in, but it was hilarious when he's like trying to get up and he's stuck in that. So, and then, like you see, the car's got the lights on and it's coming to war. It's because one of the cars that's trying to escape hits his car. He's able to escape the ditch and gets out.
Yeah. The other thing I found problematic was there was a moment when the chaos happens that a guy that's a local helicopter pilot is coming in to try to take people out with all the ash and everything falling around, and then Paul Dreyfus, the boss, is trying to tell him, like, you don't do this. Like, so then of course.
Well, the guy that gets in the chopper is the one that's trying to broker the business deal to save the town or to help the town. This multi-million-dollar deal, and then obviously there's ash flying around, and obviously they're not experts. They don't know the difference, but between, I guess, snow and ice and all that stuff. So they just obviously decide to get into the chopper when the boss is saying, "This is the worst idea possible. It's ash. Ash is going to clog up your engine. It's going to cause chaos." And it's during that time that, because of it, it clogs up the engine. And these desperate people that are trying to escape end up dying because the helicopter, as you can imagine, it crashes due to the fact that it clogged up with all this ash.
But the thing that made me laugh was that sometime after that, when they were talking to Dalton, like by radio, he's like, yeah, we'll try to get a copter to you. I'm like, that's not going to work. We've already seen how the results of that are going to happen. There's too much ash going on. There's no way they're going to get a helicopter out there during all that. But anyway, minor issues really there with that. But yeah, so Dalton and Rachel end up having to go up to Mama's cabin to get the kids and her. They get there, of course, but now the lava is starting to like flow down the mountain. It's like starting to eat up at the cabin, and then it destroys the truck. So they have to find other ways to get around. They get into a boat, which I showed not too long ago here, to get away from the house. But now the water around them is not only just insanely hot, but it's become acidic, and it's eating away at the metal bottom. So they're trying to get across this little lake while the boat's starting to be like basically starting to sink. It's slow at first, but then as they get towards the other part of the shore, because the engine, like the propeller, gets eaten, so then that stops. And so now Dalton's got his jacket around his arm and he's trying to push the water, which obviously he's going to probably end up hurting his hand at that point. But there's a big moment which is similar to something we see in Volcano, where Grandma decides that she's going to get out and pull the boat because they're getting closer to shore, so she can at least stand on the ground. But the minute she gets in the water, it's scalding and burning and eating up her skin on her leg. So she's pulling the boat towards the little landing, and of course everyone jumps out, runs to the other side, and of course the landing starts to fall apart, and Grandma finally gets out of the water, but she's really hurt. Dalton tries to carry her a little bit before she has to have him stop, and of course she's pretty much on her last leg here, no pun intended. A very touching moment. Grandma kind of took some responsibility for not coming down sooner and putting everybody at risk, but this is where Rachel and Grandma kind of reconcile their issues about what happened with the ex-husband, and the fact that they weren't getting along when they pretty much should have been working together for the kids' sake and everything, instead of kind of animosity about it all. But go ahead. I know you want to talk about this scene a little bit, so kind of just tell us how you felt about this scene.
It is kind of like, it is like you see, it was like a build up with the family. Like, you knew there was tension there. The grandmother was very stubborn, due to the fact that, of course, her sons abandoned the grandkids. So I think it's a case of, when, like, even though your son or your daughter has done the wrong, you don't want to admit that they've done the wrong. You defend them, you defend them till the end, even though they're wrong. And so she's been very stubborn. And I think it's also like what you said earlier, people get set in their ways where they don't like change, and they don't like to change routines and all of this stuff. And that's how the grandmother was. But then obviously when all of this happened, she made the ultimate sacrifice. She kind of like, this is serious. I need to be there for my grandkids. And she really give the ultimate sacrifice when she put her legs into the water, knowing probably she wasn't going to survive. But she knew it was, if her grandkids were to make it, our son's kids, she had to make that sacrifice, and she did it. And so that the bond there, and the eventual, her finally going, I wish we'd kind of done this earlier, kind of way, relationship.
Yeah.
We should have bonded over the kids earlier. We should have made this work better. Yeah. Not that it was perfect, which I think she finally regretted. It took basically in a lot of ways the end of the world for her to finally admit that they should have made changes a lot sooner.
Yeah. And so obviously she ends up passing away. But then Dalton goes and hot wires a utility truck. They get in and they go and they, try to make their way out of town because obviously shit's still coming down, the lava's coming down, but there's still some roads there, but they're trying to make their way through it. And then, of course, you saw in the clip there a little bit, there's a moment where the boss, Paul, and the rest of them are trying to get across the bridge, which is really the only way out of town. That's the only bridge out of town at that moment. So the bridge starts collapsing. Paul's stuck there with his truck and ends up dying. But you see that moment where he's kind of grabbing onto the bar. He's kind of reserved himself, knowing that he's not going to make it. He just has that look like, sorry, I can't join you or whatever.
Yeah.
He kind of,
I think out of all of the deaths in this, his for me was the most emotional.
yeah.
The fact that obviously the grandmother's death was sad, but it's the fact is why it was emotional, why I connected to it is the fact that he wasn't a bad person. He wasn't.
No.
He wasn't a dickhead of a boss. He wasn't a negative, but like I said earlier, the majority of the relationships when you see these type of movies is that there's always this conflicting personalities, like between like for example John McClane in Die Hard, when he's talking to the police captain and he's like, there's terrorists in the building, and he's like, go and fuck yourself, we're not doing it. There was always like this animosity, there's always this tug of war between the person who's who is the hero, and not that the other person's the absolute villain, but there's always like a this turbulation between people like that. And this is like one of the only films I know where that wasn't like that.
Right.
He said to them, right, I think we need to lock down the towns. I think you're going too fast with it. I need to follow protocol. There was no like arguments. There was no like head. There was no button of heads. He went, fine, let's do it your way. And then Dante's Peak erupted, and next thing you know, he's now passed away. He's now being taken away in the current of the water. And so for me, that's what stuck with me. It's the fact that he wasn't a bad person. He was just doing his job, and he's basically died doing his job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, again, it's just he reserved that, not only that he wasn't going to make it, but, he's like, even though it's not said, in his head, I'm sure he's like, I should have done something sooner. Like, it's sort of like he knew that he was trying to rectify everything that happened prior. So, like, that's why he wanted to stay behind and try to get Dalton out and everything. So it's like, it's a sad moment, but he did make some poor choices, but at the end of the day, he was still trying to do the right thing and get everybody out, which for the most part, they got most of the people out of there. So that was good.
Mm-hmm.
But, so then it leads us to back to Dalton and them. They're in the truck. They have to actually, crazy moment. I don't even know if it's legit can happen, but they have to drive across some dried up lava that's still pretty much hot in order to get to the other side. So they start doing it, and of course there's still some soft lava that's there, and the tires are catching fire. They're jumping. Then all of a sudden, somehow the dog has managed to get its way over there, gets into the truck.
Mm-hmm.
So they save the dog, and so they get across.
Well, if the dog had died, don't forget Tony wouldn't be watching it.
Yeah, right. Tony would just stop. But yeah, so they get across, and of course the tires are toast, but because of all the ash and everything, it's kind of like driving through snow, so it's not really affecting the way they can drive it that much. So then again, I think it's another blast. It's almost like a atomic bomb blast. You got all the smoke and everything. It's just destroying shit. It's just tearing up whatever's around it. So they're racing to where this little mine shaft was that the young boy was playing in earlier in the film, and they crash through it. And this is to protect them from the blast, which actually is kind of smart. That's because it's the only recourse they had. They would have been blown off the planet had they stayed out in the open. So they crash through it. They're in there. Shit falls around them. The mine collapses pretty much. But Dalton remembers he has the distress radio beacon they use with NASA and a satellite. So like you activate it, they can kind of pinpoint where you are. So it's still in beta test though, so it doesn't have like a buzzer or anything. So he goes, but gets separated from the other three, and hurts himself. I think he's in a truck again, and when he gets the gizmo, and it kind of collapses a little bit, so he's kind of hurt, but he gets the beacon to go off. And this is the part that kind of threw me off too, because the movie jumps from that to a moment where the rest of the crew are going through the data. They assume that Dalton, everybody's dead. They don't think he made it. So they're working on data to try to determine how to prevent future problems like this, except it's their job. And then one guy's there who hurt himself early in the film. He's like, well, how long has this red button been going on? And they're like, oh, I don't know, like 2 days. I'm like, I said to myself, 2 days. You know, I was like, because they just jump from one scene to the next. You don't have anything in between to kind of make it look like time has passed. So that was a little bit weird as far as the movie was concerned. But
the fact that they survived in the mine that long for 2 days with no oxygen, no food, no water.
Right. But he sees it and he smiles. He's like, oh, wow, okay, great. Because Dalton's the only one that had that little transmitter. So next scenes we see is the fire departments and the rescue operations, you know, opening up the mine. They get to him first because he's where the truck was. The other one's a little bit further in. They pull him out. Everyone's happy to see him. And of course, finally they pull out the girl and the Rachel and the 2 kids. And everyone hugs, and it's a big joyous occasion. You know, everyone's happy. And that's pretty much how it ends with the film. Did you have any problems with the film at all?
Well, we've talked about the problems in the film, like the believability of some of the things that went on was a bit far-fetched. For me, though, even though I had issues with the movie, I do like I love the setting of the movie, this mountain town. I love the 2 main cast of this movie. I thought P.S. Brosnan did a great job. I thought Linda Hamilton did a great job. Like I say, the boss character, I love the fact he's not a dick. There's like you have quite sympathy with him when he goes in the end. My issue is, like you say, it's the believability factor of some of the plot. But I do enjoy this, and I don't know why I find it really more grounded than, say, Volcano in a lot of ways. I just enjoy this film. I do. Is it something I could go back to all the time? Probably not. Maybe once in a while I could go back to it. But I enjoy it for the most part for what's there.
Yeah, it's definitely a film that I would only revisit every so often. Now, people find it surprising, but I did not like Brosnan and Hamilton in this film. As individual actors, they're very good. My problem with Brosnan is he's very samey with his character impersonations. Because like when I look at him in this film or Mamma Mia or whatever, it's like I'm looking at James Bond or Remington Steele. It's the same kind of personality. He doesn't change much.
I don't see Mamma Mia Brosnan in this. I watched that one.
Well, he's not singing for sure. Well, he was singing. He's singing "Row, Row Your Boat." So
I'm thinking Bond and Mamma Mia is a big difference.
Now, I don't know about you. Like, I wasn't really feeling the chemistry there either. Like the love interest chemistry.
It was very soap opera-y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, you're right though about the other things. The story is very strong. Setting's nice. It's a 7 out of 10 for me, and that for that reason, like I can come back every so often and still enjoy it. But it's not like the greatest film. But it is worlds better than Volcano. Volcano, I have certain things. Volcano I like, but it's very corny and way way more manufactured. It doesn't have the touching that you feeling that you get in this.
Yeah, the only thing I like about Volcano is Tommy Lee Jones.
Right.
But I agree with everything you said. But my rating for this might shock you. It's 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Because
that's fair.
Even though I know this was my pick, now that I've rewatched it again, and the reason I picked this to be me pick because I really wanted to revisit it many years after I'd seen it. It appeared on television about a couple of months ago, and not that I watched it, I'd just seen it advertised, and I thought, oh, that's not a film I have seen in a long time. So it's something I haven't revisited, so it was the perfect opportunity to revisit it. So we've done it. Did it live up to my expectations when I seen it last? I guess my expectations have stayed the same for the movie. But like I say, apart from the positives I've given it, it's a 6 out of 10 for me.
Fair enough. Yep. What do you got coming on your channel? Let people know.
Well, late at the day, me and Mr. Tony the Dead, we recorded yesterday our Television Chronicles episode of Nautilus, which is based on Jules Verne's Captain Nemo and the 20,000 Fathoms Under the Sea. It's available on Amazon Plus. So we decided to check that out, and we had a good blast with that. So check that out. And as I said to you the other day, I'm going to take a few days off from. I need a bit of a break. So the next time you see me will be when we do the Entertainment Headquarters Retro Classic Movie Show Peak Break.
Peak Break.
Yeah. sorry. Point Break. See?
Point Break.
Point Break. That tells you how much I need a break. Point Break.
And I think Sci-Fi wants to be in on that. So
yes. So hopefully, if the timing's right, we can get that done with Sci-Fi. After that, we haven't put a date yet to the next Into the Darkness franchise, which will be a Basket Case. But there's two things that I do know that are coming up that I'm very much looking forward to. That is yours Versus episode with Trick or Treat, and is it Halloween night?
Tales of Halloween.
Tales of Halloween. I'm really looking forward to that. And of course, I also will be a part of the Sci-Fi Society's Godzilla versus Gigan, which I think is the 22nd of March. So that's all I have right now.
Yeah, so for me, coming this week, I'll be doing another Kaiju Spotlight with Olvin as we do King Kong. Will be the one Kaiju we're going to focus on. And then later in the evening, Mr. Tony and I for Ghouls at Midnight. I'm trying to remember what I chose.
There's one.
We're doing his pick, Nothing But Trouble. So that's his selection.
Yeah, there was another one you and Tony mentioned the other day, and I said I'd like to be a part of it, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember what my next pick will be, but you and I for my next cinematic will be doing Highlander. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
To hit that, and then of course Silver Screen Savants. My pick for next this Saturday coming up will be Escape from New York.
Yes.
So I've got some good stuff coming up. I'm kind of slowing down this week with other stuff just so I can get a little bit of break and
like me.
Like that. yeah, it's been pretty busy. So
With I need it, especially over all the Kong stuff I did, and I just need some me time. I know next Saturday I will be very intoxicated because me and my best friend of 30 odd years, we've never been out in a long time. So we're going to finally just let our hair loose. I do know what the next pick after your pick of the Retro Classic Movie Show is going to be. So after we do your pick, my pick is going to be Legend with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry.
Tim Curry. Yeah, I haven't seen that in quite a while.
Yes, so I'm very looking forward to doing that after Point Break. I got it right.
Got it right.
Yes.
All right, bro. Please hit like and subscribe, and please go to the Entertainment Headquarters and like and subscribe to that channel with a lot of great content. Got comments about this movie? How'd you feel about it? Did you like it better than Volcano or not? Let us know your feelings on it. And as always, kind of like with Ghouls, you guys have any recommendations for what you might want Mr. Kevin and I to review? We will certainly add it to the list and put them in there when we can. We've always tried to make up as much content as we can with this stuff. But until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time on the Meltdown Radio Podcast. Ho!
You see me for you.